Debate of the Democratic candidates in the primary race for mayor of New York. Whoever wins the chance to serve as the 110th mayor of the nation's biggest city, she or he will face perhaps the biggest challenges of any new mayor in this city's history. Keep the pandemic from returning. Keep guns off the street. Keep New Yorkers safe and living without fear. Figure out how to recover from the recession. Keep people in their homes and bring back businesses and jobs. Bring them back to New York. Our tale of two cities, the haves and have-nots, is more profound than ever. The Democrats in this primary election, June 22nd, vying to become New Yorker in chief. They represent the most diverse group ever for a mayoral election in New York, and we salute them for that. The 8 candidates on stage tonight qualified under guidelines from New York City's Campaign Finance Board, and we are doing this in person here at WABC TV studios under some very strict COVID protocols. All right, let's meet the candidates. From left to right, they are Diane Morales, Eric Adams, Catherine Garcia, Sean Donovan, Scott Stringer, Maya Watt-Riley, Ray McGuire, and Andrew Yang. Candidates, thank you so much for being here. We are looking forward to hearing how you plan to tackle the problems that plague us. Our biggest goal tonight, however, is to help you, the voters, understand who these people are and why they want the job and how they would deal with important issues and questions that don't have easy answers. One more thing. New York City, for the first time, is using ranked choice voting. You can vote not just for your number 1 candidate, but for your top 5 candidates. Keep that in mind as you listen to the candidates tonight. With me tonight to ask questions, WABC political reporter Dave Evans and Univision 41 news anchor Yisel Tejeda. We're going to begin with each candidate's 45-second opening statement. The speaking order, by the way, tonight determined by a random draw for opening statement, closing statement, and position at the podium. Up first, according to the draw, Diane Morales. Ms. Morales.
When I launched my campaign for mayor, no one expected me to be here. I'm the daughter of a working-class Puerto Rican family and a single mother. I know struggle. I've been broke at the supermarket checkout counter. I've fought for education, and I've watched my children be pepper sprayed by the NYPD. I'm not a career politician. I'm not funded by a PAC. I'm here because of you. $10 at a time, more New Yorkers have supported this campaign than almost anyone else is on this stage. We believe we can get to a safer New York City by divesting $3 billion from the NYPD and investing in our communities. We can provide housing for our homeless, care for our mentally ill. We can reprioritize our budget and create new jobs and provide a pathway for opportunity for youth. Let's make sure that no one underestimates us again. I've been where you are, I've got your back, and we can build a new New York City together.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. Eric Adams is next.
Thank you. This is a critical time for New York. We're facing a pandemic of crime, inequality, and injustice. All of these issues I lived through my entire life. As a 15-year-old, I was arrested and beat by police officers. As a child, I lived on the verge of homelessness, but also learned how to turn my pain into purpose. I became a police officer, NYPD reformer, a state lawmaker, and now your Brooklyn Borough president. All the time leaning into the blue-collar values that were handed down to me by my single mom. I'm going to use those blue-collar values to create a city where we will raise healthy children and families. I know we could have a safe, affordable city. This is our moment and our movement. Join me.
Ms. Garcia, you're next.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Garcia. I want to make sure that you understand that I am the only person on this stage who will be able to deliver on every promise she makes, because that's the mayor you deserve, someone with the vision, the hustle, and the experience to get the job done. I got my working class values from my parents, a labor negotiator and a teacher. They were able to raise me and my 4 siblings in Brooklyn. And I know that I have been your crisis manager, whether it was Hurricane Sandy or during COVID, delivering 1 million meals a day. That's why the New York Times and the Daily News endorsed me, because I have the track record to deliver on impossible problems. And I want to deliver a more livable, healthier, safer city for all of New York City.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Sean Donovan.
This is a moment to rebuild. from a health pandemic, an economic pandemic, a pandemic of inequality. This moment calls for a leader with three things: a bold vision for our future, the experience to make that vision real, and a change from the political status quo of the last 8 years. I have bold ideas to create a safer city that works for everyone. Equity bonds, 15-minute neighborhoods, 500,000 good jobs. I was trusted by President Obama to lead the recovery from the Great Recession and Hurricane Sandy, helping New Yorkers rebuild our lives. Other candidates on this stage have had a chance these last 8 years to make progress. I would lead New York in a new and better direction. I'm ready to meet this moment. That's why I'm asking for your vote for mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Scott Stringer.
30 years of progressive leadership in this city is what I bring to the table as New Yorkers choose who will lead our city's greatest comeback. And I want to be blunt because the stakes are very high here. There are other progressive candidates who don't have the experience. And there are other candidates with experience who aren't progressive. I'm the only person running for mayor who has both. As an assemblyman, I passed 40 important laws for New Yorkers. I started out as a housing activist. I was borough president and now city controller. As mayor, I'm going to institute real affordable housing. As mayor, I'm going to ensure that we have universal child care, that we have a public safety plan that works for all New Yorkers. I'm ready on day one, but I'm also ready to transform the city, not just lead it. We need a mayor who can bring it all on behalf of our city, and I'm ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. Maya Wiley.
New York City is at a crossroads, and there's one path, which is the path where we try to crawl our way back to January 2020 and tinker with things. But there's another path, a path where we have the courage to recognize that this historic moment is one in which we can remake our city so that it is safe and fair and a great place to live. We can end street homelessness. We can make sure that every last person can afford this city and be safe from police violence. And this is not a time for a caretaker mayor. This is the time for a mayor with the courage to confront the bureaucracy, developers, and the NYPD, and I look forward to sharing my vision with you tonight.
Ms. Wiley, thank you. Ray McGuire.
Good evening. All of my opponents here have been in government for decades. They have failed to fix any of the problems that are most important to you. They yell about safety. Gun violence is up almost 200%. Yell about the economy. 500,000 jobs lost. Small businesses out. They yell about education, or maybe they whisper. 7 to 10 New Yorkers, 7 to 10 of our children do not read at grade level. This is a bad movie, playing out at City Hall with the same characters. We simply cannot afford a disastrous sequel. Make the change. Vote for the change. I'm a person who, in my comeback plan, includes all New Yorkers. I'll make the streets safe. I'll make the economy go. I'll make certain that all are included. I am somebody who's got proven experience. I have done this before. I'm a leader. I got receipts. I'm Ray McGuire. I'm looking for your first place vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Andrew Yang.
Hello, New York City. It's great to be with you tonight. For those watching at home, my friend Ray McGuire is 6'4". New York City has always been a place that has led, but for the past 8 years, we have fallen behind. While other cities have started cash relief programs and innovated, we have been stuck. Our schools have been closed, crime is up, the trash is piling up. Too many families are out of work and considering leaving. We can't expect the same people who have run our city into the ground these past years to then turn around and solve tomorrow's problems. We need change and a fresh start. My wife Evelyn and I are public school parents raising our 2 boys here. We need the city to work for us and our family, for you and your family, and that will require new leadership and new ideas. I will have one mission as your mayor, and that's to get our city working for us again, the people and families of New York.
Mr. Yang, thank you. And thank you all the candidates. Now to the questions by Dave and Giselle. And candidates, we do ask that you keep your answers not to exceed 1 minute. We've got a lot of information we want to get from you, and we need that time tonight. I'm going to try to gently remind you when time is up, at least the first time I'll gently remind you. If you'd like to have a rebuttal to a question, let us know. You'll have the maximum 30 seconds for that. For the first question, we start with Eyewitness News political reporter Dave Evans to Eric Adams.
Thank you, Bill. No surprise, we're going to start tonight the first question on crime. And I want to start by looking at some figures that we got just yesterday. That is crime shootings so far this year, 573 shootings with 652 victims. That is a 77% increase over the same period from last year, and it is looking like we could indeed have a very bloody summer. So my question is, during this same period, we've heard a lot of talk about defunding police. If not defunding, then moving money from the police department to social community programs. My question, and it goes to Eric first, is how do you fight crime and cut police at the same time?
Well, I said this throughout the entire campaign. We have to go upstream when we talk about fighting crime. We often have a downstream mindset. Fighting crime is both intervention and prevention. Prevention are some of the long-term plans that many of my candidates are talking about, but intervention is right now. What are we doing right now to deal with the overproliferation of handguns, to deal with the gang problem? We had 5 people shot in Brooklyn. It was a gang war. If we don't get on the ground and stop the flow of guns into our community, as well as ensuring that we have a prevention plan, and I know this too well. Everyone knows my story of coming into public life from being arrested and beat by police officers, but they don't know that I also lost a good friend, a childhood friend, who died from a gang violence shooting in South Jamaica, Queens. This is not just a professional battle for me. This is a personal battle for me. We're losing too many of our children to the crime on the streets today.
Okay. Next, we're going to go to Catherine. Catherine, you've talked about a gun buyback program of increasing the gun purchase for each gun from $200 to $2,000. Eric has said that won't work. Your response, and also how you would solve this violent crime problem that we have.
Absolutely. We have gone from a pandemic of COVID to an epidemic of gun violence. We have to use every tool in the toolbox. So yes, I want to buy back guns because that is potentially a life saved. But I also want to make investments in the gun suppression unit and really dig into the data so we are pinpointing where this is occurring and managing to those numbers. But we have to stop the flow of guns into this country, into this city, because we know that there are no gun manufacturers in the city of New York. The iron pipeline is real, and we can have a deep plan with our federal partners to stop that. But it is also about going upstream and making sure that people who will become part of the criminal justice system are stopped by investing in our foster kids, by making sure that we have summer youth employment. So I am a believer in making sure that we are doing what we need to do now, but also in making the investments in our youth so that we do have a safer city for everyone.
Sean Donovan, my question, though, is how do you fight crime and cut police at the same time? You've spoken about cutting police in the past.
Look, this is too important an issue to answer it with hashtags or tweets. We need to make sure that we are focused on both safety and respect. And the way that we do that is by really focusing our police on guns and violent crime, not asking them to set up barricades on our open streets or be mental health experts with our homeless. We do need to get the guns off our street. We are not manufacturing them here. I have a unique relationship with President Biden, with mayors and governors across this country, to make sure that we stop the flow of illegal guns into our city from out of state. But here's the other thing. We're witnessing an epidemic of mental health on our streets, in our shelters, on our subways. And we need someone who's actually worked to get mentally ill people housed, to end chronic homelessness in this city. That's something I did as housing commissioner. We reduced the number of people sleeping on our streets and in shelter by 30%. And I led the strategy nationally that ended veteran homelessness in 80 cities. I can do that as mayor.
Thank you, Sean. But before we go to Scott, I wanted to ask you, Scott, you have mentioned in the past a fear of going back to the Giuliani days of stop and frisk. Are you directing that at Eric Adams?
I'm certainly directing it at Eric and anybody who thinks that the only solution to preventing crime is going back to the Giuliani days with stop and frisk and a Republican agenda that put a lot of kids in our criminal justice system, and many innocent kids went to prison. Look, I grew up in this city. I came from Washington Heights when there were 2,000 murders a year. I remember when the A train was a rolling crime scene. I'm not sending my kids or any kids back to those days. I want to focus police on solving violent crime, and I have a community safety plan to do that. We have to make sure that we protect our children and we stop the violence and the shootings. But we also have to understand that stop and frisk is real, and over-policing in communities of color is very real. Part of what we have to also do is hold our police force to its highest standards. One of the things I'm going to do is reform the CCRB. When Maya was there, she basically was a rubber stamp for the PBA. I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to take police discipline away from the commissioner, focus on the new CCRB, and we're going to transform policing. Here's the goal. Keep our streets safe, understand that policing matters, but do it in a fair and just way, and let's not go back to the days we're going to regret.
Maya, I'll give you a little bit of extra time here because I think, you know, you certainly today were not.
May I respond to that my name was mentioned?
I think the time is mine now. And
okay, go ahead, and then we'll go back to Eric for a rebuttal.
Look,
Maya.
There's something that you did not say, Dave, in the lead up to the question about crime and it being up. And that's that we have thousands of police officers in patrol cars sitting around this city, all over this city. And this is a time when what we need to do is have smart policing. And smart policing means both focused on the crimes we need to focus on. One of the crimes is absolutely homicides, keeping illegal guns out of our city and off our streets. But the other thing that it means is the crimes we're not even talking about, like rape, which is up 52%. And guess what? This takes me to, besides smart policing and using our resources right, that we have to take away the kinds of things we're asking police officers to do they have no business doing, like mental health crisis response. And let me tell you why I know this. Because I did chair the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board and am a civil rights lawyer and created a criminal justice initiative in post-apartheid South Africa. And Scott, I am so grateful that I got the opportunity to fight just like the families were doing who have lost loved ones, including Eric Garner's family, to get that case over to the New York City Police Department with charges and to protect the civilian prosecution, the power that we have in the CCRB to make sure our prosecutors prosecuted the case. And that's what got him off the force finally. And I have a plan to make it true civilian accountability with the civilian police commissioner, because I will have narrow control.
We got to change the CCRB and the de Blasio police strategy.
And the other thing I'll do is something you're not talking about, which is creating a civilian oversight body that also addresses the cases that come to the police department, not just the CCRB.
You had that opportunity as head of the CCRB and you dropped the ball.
We got to pause here and give.
Can I break in here?
Wait, no, you can't. We have to go back to Eric Adams because he has been directly attacked about stop and frisk. I'd like to hear 30 seconds rebuttal from Eric. Go.
Listen, this is an Anthony Fauci moment. Imagine 20 years from now, someone say, hey, Anthony, you did nothing for COVID. That's how I feel right now. Where has Scott been? I testified in federal court. The judge mentioned my name about stop and frisk. I fought against stop and frisk for 22 years when I wore the uniform. That's how New Yorkers know me. When you say Eric did not play a role to stop the abuse of stop and frisk, then you are trying to rewrite history, and I feel like Anthony Fauci right now.
Eric,
Scott, don't rewrite history.
Scott, go ahead. Scott, go ahead.
What I said was a lot of your proposals speak to a badge and a gun first, ask questions later. That has nothing to do with stop and frisk, as you know, because I stood next to you at press conferences. I was one of the first leading elected officials in the city to say, let's end stop and frisk. You know I was a participant in that. I'm talking about your criminal justice plan right now. We need to look at 911 and reform it. We can no longer respond to mental health complaints with over-policing. We need mental health providers and experts. This is the new policing I'm going to do.
We're going to wrap up there.
Eric, if you're not packing, maybe the thing we should do is put stop and frisk out there and cease and desist here.
Ray, go ahead, because it's your turn to give us a minute on your on how you feel about how to reform the police
stop
department.
and frisk, it didn't work, right? We got 600,000 or 700,000 black and brown kids who were stopped, questioned, and frisked, 90% of whom were found innocent with nothing. So any of those who are advocating stop and frisk today, we know that is outdated. It did not work. Going back to the Giuliani era, stop and frisk is not something that works. We need to move forward. We need to look at what is today. Defund is not accurate. Defund doesn't work. If anybody knows anything about the budget, the largest increase we've had in the budget is $400 million that goes to administration. We haven't included much in the budget that has to do with police patrolling. So what do we need to do? First, we need to get the guns off the street. Accurate. We need to get the guns off the street by whatever means necessary, not stop and frisk. We have new ways. We know that the success that we had with getting guns off the street after stop and frisk was much higher than it was when we had stop and frisk. So we need to focus on the shot stoppers, the shot spotters. We need to focus on training the NYPD, work with the NYPD to go where the guns are. And yes, I agree. Go and hit the I-95 iron pipeline, working with the local, state, and federal officials where the guns get manufactured and how they all of a sudden arrive in the top 10 precincts in this city.
There's one fact we're not talking about, which is that we spend $1 billion on police misconduct and negligence over a 3-year period. $1 billion. It is costly to have unfair policing in.
Maya, we've heard a lot from you on this. We got to move on. We got to move on.
Last year, you said you would bring back stop and frisk.
Maya, Mr. Yang, we got to go on to Andrew Yang. Andrew, go ahead.
Defunding the police is not the right approach for New York City. The fact is we have 5,000 or so police officers who submitted retirement papers. So we need to go on a massive recruitment drive. If you want to help make your community safe, you should apply to the NYPD. We need to have a police force that reflects our great city. I was frustrated by the nature of the conversation around gun violence because the simple truth is you will never get gun violence down if the solve rate for shootings in Brooklyn is below 25%, which is what it is right now. You have 3 out of 4 shooters still out there. And the reason for that is just failure on the part of our government. Once again, you have detectives who are staffed to a shooting, and then 3 days later another shooting happens, and then 3 days another shooting happens, and guess what? They can't solve the first shooting. We need to staff up in the precincts and in the gun violence suppression division. We need to evolve to 21st century policing, have an anti-violence and community safety unit of plainclothes officers in these communities working with leaders to get the guns out, and employ focused deterrence, because the fact is when you go to a community, they know who's trouble. We can go to them and say, look, if anything happens in your community, we're going to come to you first. But it starts with getting the solve rate up. It is unconscionable that 3 out of 4 shooters in Brooklyn are still on the loose. We will never address it unless we get that right.
All right, thanks, Andrew. We're going to wrap up with Diane, and you have spoken in favor of defunding.
I have, in fact, and I'm actually really struck by the fact that no one on this stage has talked about the fact that we can't actually decouple the increase in crime, whether it's gun violence or other crime, from the increased insecurities that New Yorkers have faced and encountered over the last 15 months. Our government has fundamentally failed to provide housing security, to provide food security, to provide economic security, to provide access to health care in the middle of a global pandemic. I guarantee you that if we actually provided jobs to these young people, if we actually provided economic stability to our communities, that the violence that we're witnessing would be dramatically decreased. That is why one of the things I've called for is actually the creation, first of all, of the Community First Responders Department. We need to actually start responding to crime, different crimes, homelessness, mental health, substance abuse, with appropriate responses. But we also need to provide economic security and stability to New Yorkers so they are not resulting to crime. That is one of the things we need to do to really address these issues in the short term and the long term.
All right, Ms. Morales, thank you very much. We could spend an hour talking about crime and insecurity and what to do with the police department, whether to expand it or cut it back. But we thank you all very much for starting the debate here. I want to turn it over to my colleague, Giselle, and we're going to talk, I think, first about the economic crisis that now exists. The epidemic has given rise to a recession, and a lot of problems ensue. Giselle?
Thank you, Bill. Este debate es muy importante para nuestra comunidad hispana y Noticias Univisión 41 está aquí para buscar respuestas a tus preguntas. Y ahora a las preguntas. The pandemic has left New York City with a profound economic crisis. Latino and Black residents, as we all know, have been hit the hardest. How do we rebuild this city, create jobs, reopen small businesses, and get housing for the homeless? And at the same time, right, not drive away people who are already taxed at the highest rates in the country? And I would like to start with you, Ms. Garcia.
Thank you for that question. This city has been hit incredibly hard by COVID. But one of the things that is also true is that women have been hit harder. My sister owns an event space. This has been a really bad year. That's why in my plan to rebuild the economy, we need one business permit for small businesses, get the bureaucracy out of the way. We have to give small business 0% loans. We need to fund childcare for those 0 to 3, for those making under $70,000, because you know what? Childcare is infrastructure. You can't go to work without it. When I am mayor, I'm going to put these things in place, and we're not going to measure how many fines or fees we received. We're going to be measuring how many businesses opened, because that is how we bring New York City back, and that is how we are strong again. And I have been a leader in this area for the last 14 years.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Sean Donovan.
It's coming to you.
Thank you. It is absolutely true. I've learned it again and again leading through crisis, that those who are most vulnerable before a crisis hits are always hurt the worst by it. That's why we've seen disproportionate devastation and job loss in our immigrant and low-income, our Black and brown communities. And so I would lead our recovery by investing in small businesses. I have a plan to create 500,000 jobs, starting with not just ensuring they can survive, but thrive. Cutting the regulation. Our current mayor thinks we can regulate our way to recovery. Stop the fines, stop victimizing small businesses, and make sure that we're providing an entrepreneurship financing fund, other ways to grow those businesses long term. We also have to recognize this is a New Deal moment. We need to bring the billions of dollars of aid coming from Washington, connect it to our communities through our nonprofits and other community leaders. That's the way we're going to build from the ground up.
Thank you. Now I would like to ask Mr. Scott Stringer, how do we rebuild the city that we all love?
I can tell you, we all know this, and we should be reminded of this. We lost 32,000 New Yorkers to COVID. My own mom died in a Bronx hospital, and I remember talking to her doctors who said, you have to understand the people who are dying in the Bronx are Black and Latino people who the city never helped healthcare-wise, that the city never invested in affordable housing, that the city never invested in education. The next mayor has to change this paradigm once and for all, because COVID was the killer, but we contributed to this. And as mayor, I'm going to focus on economic revitalization, which is not about the $50 billion that Wall Street made, but I'm going to invest in our small businesses. We have to invest in our green economy. We need a CUNY workforce development plan for our kids. I will put that in on day one because I'm ready to put this plan in place.
Maya Wiley.
Hemos perdido 40% de los empleados en comunidades latinos. 40%. We recover from crisis. What we have not done in the past is recover every last one of us. And as a civil rights lawyer who has focused my career on communities of color, I've got a plan called New Deal New York. We're going to create 100,000 new jobs by building things we need built, like affordable housing we can actually afford, and making sure we're doing local targeted hiring in communities that have lost the most jobs. And I'm not going to forget women, particularly women of color who've lost jobs in the care economy. We are going to create universal care grants, $5,000 grants for the neediest families, but drop-off centers for care, child care, and care for our elderly parents, because we have to care for those who care for us, and I'm going to get that done.
Thank you so much, Maya Wiley. Now to Ray McGuire, how do we, create jobs and reopen small businesses?
Listen, I have been fortunate to manage through crises. There's no going back. This is how we move forward. I have a plan, which you can read at rayformayor.com, the largest, most inclusive economic comeback plan in the history of New York City. 500,000 jobs, Go big, go small, go forward. Go big, focus on infrastructure. Go small, 50,000 jobs in our small businesses where we'll subsidize half of their wages for 1 year, make sure that they help to continue the retention of the New York City sales tax receipts, and going forward, making sure that the MWBEs who were excluded get included, and that we invest in technology, which is the world of the future, and we need to make sure that we invest in workforce training, vocational training for those New Yorkers whom we haven't met educationally. Let's meet them with the skills so they can participate in the New York of the future.
Andrew Yang,
I got a plan. Thank you.
Andrew Yang, what's your take on this?
I'm so passionate about small business owners because I was one for years. I owned and operated a small business right here in New York City, and every time I see a darkened storefront, I think of the family that poured years of blood, sweat, and tears into trying to make that business work. We have to help small businesses get back on their feet. They provide most of the jobs in our communities, but we have to face facts. There will be no economic recovery if we don't make our streets and subways safe. When people don't feel safe coming into New York City, there aren't customers on the streets. So we have to address public safety. We have to get street homelessness down so that when people go to neighborhoods, they feel welcomed. And then we have to be a partner to small business owners, not treat them as revenue sources. I would declare a moratorium on small business fines, help them get on their feet, and then start a People's Bank that would invest directly in minority and women-owned businesses in black and brown neighborhoods that are going to get overlooked in any recovery. The big corporate giants will not finance these businesses, so we need a People's Bank that will do exactly that.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. Diane Morales, what's your vision on this?
So listen, as a former nonprofit executive who on the regular managed budgets where we were getting reimbursed 80 cents on the dollar and that was the expectation, I understand what it is we need to do in order to balance the budget and actually grow the economy at the same time. We've got to end corporate bailouts and corporate welfare. We have to prioritize investing in our small and mid-sized businesses because we know that they actually are responsible for employing 50% of New Yorkers. We need to actually also invest in our care economy because we saw over the course of the last 15 months who it is that took care of the rest of us so that the rest of us could function. This is a new way to think about a new economy for the people where we are prioritizing our communities rather than prioritizing corporations who come into our communities, exploit our wealth, and extract our labor. We have an opportunity here to build something new that builds from the ground, that strengthens New Yorkers, and we can do it now.
Eric Adams.
Thank you, thank you. I want the camera to be front and center, you know. Don't start the clock yet. You know, so let's be clear. The prerequisite to prosperity is public safety and justice. They go together. No one is coming to New York in our multi-billion-dollar tourism industry if you have 3-year-old children shot in Times Square. No one is coming here if you have people being pushed on the subway because of mental health illnesses. If we're going to turn around our economy, we have to make this city a safe city. When you look at our high-income earners, 65,000 people pay 51% of our income tax. When you speak to them leaving the city, they talk about public safety. When you look at the shooting of a 1-year-old child in Bedford-Stuyvesant, it's public safety. We must be safe, and then on that platform, we can build our economy the right way.
Mr. Adams, thank you. I want to say that when
we can't do safety at the expense of justice. We cannot. And that means we can't have stop and frisk back or the anti-crime unit. I've had to go to court with my beautiful black godson because he was riding a skateboard while black or sitting in a park while black.
Thank you very much.
We're not going backwards. We're only going forward.
I appreciate that.
Well, hold on. She interrupted me, so I should be able to respond.
You stopped, Mr. Adams. You did stop. Let me just offer this. Yes. When the camera's moving towards you, there's another camera. You are on it. Don't pay attention to that. Just start talking. Number two, this next round is 45 seconds. We do want to get a lot of questions in. I'm going to start this round with us asking questions of an individual. And we're going to start with Mr. Yang. Mr. Yang, your experience and lack of government experience has been put under the microscope in this campaign. So too has your record in the private sector. You haven't voted in a mayoral election this century. That would be 5 of them, although I assume you're going to vote in the primary on June 22nd. How do you respond to the criticism that you haven't accomplished much to prepare you for being mayor of New York?
Thanks, Bill. I have the experience that a lot of New Yorkers can relate to, which is that I owned and operated a small private company that then grew to become #1 in the country. And if you've ever run a business, you know a few things. No one cares about excuses or politics. You have to make the numbers work. you have to recruit a team and build a positive culture. And then after that, I started a nonprofit that created thousands of jobs and was honored by the Obama administration. And most New Yorkers met me when I started a national movement around cash relief. And a lot of people didn't think that movement was going to be possible, but here we are less than 2 years later, $1,200 check, $600 check, $1,400 check, child poverty tax credit. So people in New York know exactly what I've been up to the past several years, and they know this is exactly the kind of experience we need in this time of crisis to lead our city in a better direction.
Okay, Mr. Yang, thank you very much. Next question from Dave to Mr. Donovan.
Sean, I wanted to ask you, you probably know more about the homeless than anyone here because of your work on housing for both the Obama administration and the Bloomberg administration. But I wanted to ask you specifically, what would you do in the first 100 days to address the growing homeless problem in New York City? And specifically, examples like we saw last summer. Homeless folks camped out on 79th Street here on the Upper West Side. How do you fix that in the first 100 days?
Dave, I'm so glad you asked this. You know, as a kid growing up in this city, I saw homelessness exploding on our streets, and it made me angry we would allow it to happen in the wealthiest city on earth. So I've dedicated a 30-year career to making housing more affordable, and I've been successful in bringing down homelessness in the city and around the country. But the thing we have to focus on first is that we're on the verge of the worst eviction crisis of our lifetimes. And today I announced a comprehensive plan that builds on the work I did to keep millions of families in their homes after the Great Recession. Second, we have to understand that we're never going to solve homelessness just with shelter. It's a problem of mental health. It's a problem of substance abuse. So we need to invest in supportive housing. That's permanent housing with the services that people need to get their lives back on track.
But Sean, is there anything you can do in the first 100 days?
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. We're going to move on to the next question. Yisel for Diane Moore.
Thank you so much. Ms. Morales, there has been some allegations about racial aggression, sexual harassment, exploitation, among other violations that contradict what your campaign has been promoting thus far. What do you tell voters, right, that may be concerned that these types of allegations might just follow you into City Hall?
Sure. You know, I think the first thing that I have to tell voters is that I have been a successful manager and leader of organizations for decades. And the kind of thing that we're talking about that has transpired on this campaign is actually something that is not uncommon for managers, you know, that are seasoned and that have much experience. What is most important to note here is that as soon as I became aware of the situation, I intervened. I acted swiftly. And the actors that were in question are no longer with the campaign. So, you know, I think what's really important is to look at and measure the decades of successful experience that I've had. And actually, the reality, too, is that our team grew from 13 staff to 90 in the span of about 6 weeks. And so that kind of growth is explosive and unusual, but we responded, we addressed it, and we're moving on, moving forward to on this campaign, and I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. Mr. McGuire, you get the next question. You have faced some of the same criticisms that Mr. Yang has faced, lack of government experience in your career. You have spent time, certainly, in the private sector. What do you tell voters who question your lack of government experience preparing you to be mayor of New York?
First, I would encourage the voters to look at those who have had decades of government experience and how has that done for us now. I think the experience that I've had and leading in managing budgets, often larger than most state budgets, in building teams, in attracting and recruiting the best talent, in making sure that talent had scorecards and was held accountable. I lasted in my position. As a matter of fact, I was the first one in my position to last as long as I've been able to last, 13 years, longer than anyone else. At this moment in time, you want me on that wall. You want somebody who's got the experience that I have, who's managed through crisis, who has managed through crisis successfully, which is what this city needs now. We don't need somebody who doesn't have any experience. We need somebody who's got actual experience, who can get things done, who's got receipts. And I got receipts.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire.
I think Ray would agree with this. We're facing a $5.3 billion budget deficit starting in 2023, and no one's talking about it. I have no idea. Like, imagine if you were a household that knew you were going to owe $5 billion in 2023, and then we give you $12 billion today. and then you spend it all before any of these people are going to have a chance to take office. Mayor de Blasio is setting us up.
Andrew, you're right. Andrew, you're right. You don't have any idea about the budget.
Ray would agree with me on this, I'm sure, because it's common sense.
Andrew, that is
a $5 billion deficit.
Andrew, as somebody,
all of us
if you're going to yell one at a time.
We've actually managed budgets larger than most state budgets. And you know what? I've been held accountable for managing those budgets. So look at the track record. Nobody else here has a track record of actually having been held accountable. I had to do more with less, and often I had to do everything with nothing. And we did it successfully.
Hold on. I'll call you.
Andrew, you're right. You don't know what's going on because, as your consultants have told you time and time again, they admit you're an empty vessel. And I actually don't think you're an empty vessel. I think you're a Republican who continues to focus on the issues that will not bring back the economy. In fact, what you're focusing on, things like casinos in Governor's Island, you're focusing on TikTok houses in the midst of a housing crisis. And what I'm saying to you today is there is a budget crisis, but it's a budget crisis that with $6 billion in federal stimulus money, more money from foundation aid coming from Albany, the next mayor must have the experience on day one who could manage closing the out-year $4 billion budget gaps.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. Ms. Wiley, you're next.
Can I just say,
only one yelling at a time, please.
Instead of doing personal attacks, let's focus on experience. And Andrew, Venture for America, you promised 100,000 jobs. You created 150. And graduates of historically black colleges and universities did not get the opportunities that they were promised. And in a city where it is black and Latino and Asian communities that have had the highest job loss, the greatest deaths, this is actually about experience that we can all understand.
Hold on, wait, whoa. Mr. Yang, you were attacked, so let me give you 30 seconds.
Venture for America created thousands of jobs around the country, as documented by Vox and many other outlets. It was honored not once but twice by the Obama administration, and it operated in Detroit, New Orleans, Baltimore, Cleveland, Birmingham, cities that are majority minority. So I'm incredibly proud of the work that Venture for America did. And we need to take that exact same ingenuity and innovation to other parts of the problems we are facing as a city. We are being set up with a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit in 2.5 years, and everyone on the stage should be livid about it, unless you don't expect to be mayor. But if you expect to be mayor, you have to be livid about the fact that we're going to be left holding the bag on a mismanaged city budget.
We're going to move on, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, Mr. Stringer. You're going to ask the question in a second. Mr. Donovan did have his hand raised. He gets 30 seconds to rebut, and then I'm going to go to Dave Evans.
First, I just want to say, as a member of the Obama administration, Andrew, please don't take an award that was about the promise, not the results, and take credit for it. I'm offended by that as a member of that administration.
Not once, but twice, 2012 to 2015.
I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually managed a budget larger than the New York City budget, actually 40 times. Larger than the state budgets you talked about, Ray. We need a mayor who actually understands how to get us out of this crisis and to build the relationships at this New Deal moment that can bring the resources from Washington to help us rebuild our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Yang, you have 15 seconds to respond. Just 15 seconds, please. No, Mr. Wire. Mr. Yang.
Oh, so Sean, I'm sure you're as concerned as I am about the fact that our budget is going to be facing a $5.3 billion deficit in 2.5 years. And Mayor de Blasio is spending most of the federal money in the first year's budget and hasn't taken even basic cost-cutting measures that should be commonplace in any agencies of this size and scale. We're up to 329,000 employees. It's just gone up and up, even as other New Yorkers have had to cut back.
I was the first candidate to lay out a clear plan to actually solve the budget deficit.
So you and I are on the same page.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to move on to the next subject. Mr. Stringer, you're next. So you're next. So hold on.
Dave, we're going to ask you the next question if we can. Go ahead. In the last couple of weeks, you've lost a lot of support from the Working Families Party, from Congressman Espaillat, and from some others. And that is because of the accusation of sexual harassment. One woman from 20 years ago who was a campaign volunteer. I wanted to ask you about this because in the past you've said many, many times that women need to be heard on this issue. But on this, you say the accusation simply isn't true. So is the accuser in this case, Jean Kim, is she lying?
So I believe that women should be heard. I believe that Joe Biden's accuser should be heard. And then facts kick in. And what I've tried to say is there have been inconsistencies, and I've denied the allegations. It's up to the voters to look at the facts. There's a number of media outlets that are reporting more facts every day, including tonight in The Intercept. And I ask people to judge the facts. This is something that happened 20 years ago. I do believe that Gene should be heard. I've said that on day one. I'll continue to say it. But I also have to say that these allegations are false and there are inconsistencies.
Okay.
My
Giselle.
question is directed to Ms. Garcia. You've been criticized for quitting your job in the height of the pandemic, when New Yorkers needed food and when trash was too often piling up. Just this week, one of your opponents said that anyone who worked for the current administration for 7 of his 8 years is not the change we need. Considering your work history, will your administration be any different from Mayor Bill de Blanc's administration? If so, how?
I invite anyone on this stage to talk about track records because I actually have one. No one on this stage did more than during the pandemic back in March and April and May when things were really dire to keep this city going. Not only delivering literally 1 million meals a day, which is now a program that has reached 230 million meals, but also making sure that we were collecting the garbage during the height of COVID. And I would hear stories from people that when they heard the garbage truck, and they don't always love hearing a garbage truck in the middle of the night, they knew that it would be okay. I was there for New York because I take on the tough problems and I do the job day in and day out, no matter what the weather is.
So why did you quit in the height of the pandemic?
I left in September because I knew that the budget had been cut at the Department of Sanitation, and I very forcefully said that it was the wrong decision. I believe that I could make more progress outside than inside.
Thank you very much. David?
My question is going to be for Maya Wiley, and Maya worked with me here on time, okay?
45 seconds.
Depends on the question, Dave.
45 seconds, Ms. Wiley.
I want to ask you a little bit more about police funding. You've talked about moving $1 billion from the police department to different programs. So my question is, what do you cut from the police department to pay for this?
Well, first, I've said very clearly that in our universal care plan, where we're going to put $5,000 into the pockets, starting with 100,000 neediest families, and you will not have to have documentation to be eligible. You are our people. And to create community care centers, we are going to stop the hiring in the next 2 police cadet classes. As I have said, we have a police department that is bloated, a $6 billion budget, and that does not count.
So you want fewer police?
That does not count. The literally $1 billion in payouts that we make that is not coming out of their budget. It is coming out of the general coffer, and it is time that we recognize that smart policing, done right, done fairly, is what's going to keep us safe, as well as investing in our people, and that's what I'll do.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wiley. Giselle?
But where do we cut?
My question is for Eric
2
Adams.
academy classes.
Where do we cut?
2 academy
I just said
classes.
2 academy
$5.7 billion budget.
And there are other parts of the budget, including the other bloat. I've said I'd end the vice
operating
unit.
budget. Where do we cut?
Well, I'm happy to, if I get more time, to talk more.
30
A couple of
seconds.
seconds. Where do
Mr. Stringer.
you cut one police plaza? The budget at the top level bureaucracy has increased 76%, Ray. We could take some of that money, disperse it to the precincts that are desperately in need of resources, not just people power, but also programs for kids. There's a lot that we could do.
But Maya, I think you have implied,
that's
here that
$300 million in bureaucratic bloat.
Out of the administration.
Out of the administration. From Police Plaza to take it to the precinct
but
level
our
and then invest in our children.
Scott,
it can
our
be
question is
done.
to Maya. You've implied that you want to cut. We have about 35,000 police on the force now. You want a smaller police department.
Yes, because we have the ability to right-size the police department.
How small?
Well, but one of the things that I've said and made clear that I'm going to do, because we're going to make this a process that includes the people of the city of New York, because I've got the courage to listen to, is that we are going to have a process with a civilian oversight commission that's going to set both the rules of the road and also make sure that discipline is adhered to and administered. But it's also going to go through the process of re-auditing the police department and restructuring it, because we have units that we can dispense with, and we can and must make it easier to get a job than a gun in our our community.
Appreciate it very much. Yisel, let's change topics, and you have Mr. Adams.
Yes, thank you so much. Mr. Adams, you have shown your support to charter schools on numerous occasions, yet you have stopped short of endorsing a lifting of the cap. Tonight, what can you tell New Yorkers? Should more city money go into charter schools or not?
Okay, and I want to do an observation on this side of the stage here. You know, this is a very peaceful end of the stage. You know, it feels as though there's a four-person debate going on here, and we are being ignored on this side. So we're not interrupting. We're not interrupting.
You're up now, Mr.
We are allowing
Adams.
each other to speak on this side, and I really hope that we have the discipline to allow all of us to have the time frame that has been allocated.
You have your chance
because
now,
there's
Mr.
ideas down
Adams.
here as well. I believe in scaling up excellence. I was bused to Bayside High School as a child. I walked into the school. I saw the difference and the quality of what was in that school and compared to South Jamaica, Queens. I believe we need to scale up excellence and stop having this adult conversation and leaving out our children. That is my focus, scaling up excellence.
Can I just say
Yes,
that
of
I've
course.
had the courage to say I would increase the cap on charters because I put children first. But my focus is on the public schools. My sister is a public school teacher. I know that every kid is precious, and that is why I would move $130 million from the Tweed building, which is headquarters, into classrooms. 2 teachers and 2 principals. That I would fund the 140 schools where 20% of homeless kids actually attend, and that there would be art and music and sports and theater. This is why the New York Times endorsed me, because I have the track record to actually get this done.
Okay.
We actually need to recognize
Diane Morales.
the inequities that exist in our charter school system, the disproportionate way in which black and brown kids are disciplined, the ways in which they are harmed in our charter school system. We need to prioritize and focus on improving the quality of our public school system. We cannot continue diverting public funds into charter schools that screen our children in different ways, that do not work to meet all of their educational needs, that disproportionately punish them with punitive responses. We actually need to focus on our public school system and strengthen and improve the quality of our public school system so that our families don't feel they need to resort to charter schools. That's where we need to invest.
Hold on. We're going to give everyone 30 seconds to talk about education, and we're going to talk about it in the next hour as well. But we want to continue this educational debate. Let's just go right up the line. Mr. Donovan?
Look, I'm for good schools. We've had a mayor in City Hall for the past 8 years who's put ideology and politics ahead of our kids. And so we need to make sure that we're working with all of our schools around the city. And let's be clear that recovering from this pandemic, the most important thing we can do is help our kids recover. My Education Recovery Corps would put young people side by side in the classroom with our teachers, not just to focus on education, but also on their social and emotional recovery at this moment. That's critical. And we have to better connect our schools to jobs when we've still got 500,000 New Yorkers
Donovan, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mr.
Every
Stringer,
high school student should have
remote
at least
learning,
one
Mr.
paid
Stringer.
internship or apprenticeship.
Our students have been remote learning for a year. We don't know what the long-term effects are on our children. What's your answer to this question?
I have 2 kids in the public school system, a 3rd grader and a 2nd grader, and I'm a failed remote learning teacher. But, you know, I had privilege to make up the difference. The kids in homeless shelters who didn't have remote devices, the kids who were in public housing who didn't have internet access. We've got to make sure when they go back to school, they go back to something. And right now, the truth is that the fight in this campaign is about charter schools and privatization. Andrew Yang and Eric Adams are both taking millions of dollars from Republican billionaires who want to privatize the school system. I'm endorsed by the teachers. I'm telling you that will never happen because we have to invest in our public schools.
Ms. Wiley.
I thought I heard Eric Adams.
Hold on. You will. Ms. Wiley, really quickly. 30 seconds.
I went to a segregated, overcrowded black elementary school when I was young, and I have a plan to make sure we do not lose a generation of our kids. I'm going to hire 2,500 new teachers to bring our class sizes down. And I'm going to make sure that we have trauma-informed care in our schools because our kids are traumatized. And we're going to make sure that they get the care they need because that sends graduation rates up.
Thank you, Ms. Wiley.
Last thing, though,
No, that's the last thing. Mr. McGuire, you're 30 seconds.
Thank you. Listen, education is deeply personal to me. It's the only way I got here. My now 95-year-old mother sacrificed for me to get a world-class education. Today, our children's lives are determined by their zip code. We need the best district schools. We need the best charter schools. We need the best magnet schools, and we need the best parochial schools. We need to do whatever we can. What they're describing here doesn't work. We need to transform the entire educational system. My plan is cradle to career. We're going to be responsible for our children's education from the time they're born until the time they graduate.
Appreciate it. Mr. Yang, you have 30 seconds.
I'm a public school parent, so this is deeply personal, and we've been failing far too many of our kids. Right now, the priority has to be to get our kids back in the building, because the fact is kids just learn better in school 5 days a week. School's not just schoolwork, it's also extracurriculars, sports. My kids are not very sporty. I'd like to change that. And socializing. So we need to get our kids back into school, and then we need to let leaders lead, which means empowering principals to make the decisions that are best for our kids, whether it's hiring, programming, what kind of curricula that our kids need.
Thank you, Mr. Yang.
But this is the path forward, and most of our kids right now are deeply behind after this year. We have to make up ground very, very quickly.
Mr. Yang, thank you very much. We have 3.5 minutes left, 4 minutes left before this hour is over.
Of that should be
hold on for a second. We're going to wrap up the first hour of the debate on Channel 7. We're going to continue our second hour on ABC 7 NY. But in the meantime, we do have some lightning round questions we want to do. Did anyone not talk about education here?
Well, I did, yeah.
You did?
I mean, I'd like to.
You have 30 seconds, and we'll do a lightning round question.
Great. I would say, as the only former public school teacher in this race, as a graduate of the public school system, and as the parent of 2 children who graduated from the public school system, I can tell you that we are not serving our children well. Our black and brown children do not see themselves reflected in the curriculum. We need culturally responsive curriculum. We need teachers that reflect the students. If our children do not feel loved, valued, and respected, they are never going to learn. We need to fundamentally transform how we teach them.
Eric, you have 20 seconds.
Listen, if we don't educate, we're going to incarcerate. And that is what we're doing. 65% of black and brown children never reach proficiency in this city. We don't have dyslexia screening. That's why you see 30 to 40% of our young people are incarcerated, are dyslexic. 55% have a learning disability. The name of the game, we have to go upstream and stop responding and pulling our children out downstream.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Ms. Garcia, 20 seconds.
You know, I'm a product of the public school systems. My sister is a public school teacher today. It has been such a terrible year. We must get our kids back in schools and give them everything that they need, art and music, but also mental health support. We do not know how their trauma will manifest itself, but we do know that it will occur, and we have to be prepared. We need a plan now, not just about the ventilation, but how we're going to care for their socio-emotional lives.
We are going to get to our next hour, and we're going to go into our digital platforms, and we hope to move over. But I do want to go to a quick lightning round. And we're going to start with Ms. Morales. When you vote, you're going to get a second choice vote. Who will you vote for second choice and why? 15 seconds.
That's a really popular question these days, and quite frankly, I am not sure yet. There are some talented folks on this stage, but no one quite comes close to the platform and the vision that I have for New York City.
Thank you very much.
Holding on
That's an answer. Mr. Adams, you have 15 seconds.
I am still looking. I'm a little disappointed that it took the candidates so long to deal with the violence that we're seeing in this city, but I'm still looking, and I'm going to make that determination on who's my second choice.
Much.
But we know I'm your first choice.
We know you're first, yes. Mr. Garcia, 15 seconds.
And I'm my first choice. Okay. To be quite frank with you, if I had a second choice, I probably would not get into this race. But I believe that I'm the only one who has the vision and the experience to actually deliver.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan, I hate to do this to you. 10 seconds each. We're going to run out of time.
Bill, sounds like a lot of politicians on this stage who won't give you an answer. I've said Maya Wiley would be my second choice. I have deep respect for the work she's done on civil rights.
Thank you very much.
Just yesterday, President Biden in Tulsa
Mr. Stringer,
recognized my civil rights work in his racial equity plan.
Thank you very much. Scott?
That was important. I'm still trying to get those first place votes. I can't even deal with this right now.
Ms. Wiley.
June 22nd, 20 days away. I am very focused on our platform.
Quick answer.
Ray McGuire, number 1, and also number 2.
Okay, Mr. Yang.
I like it in Meyer, I like it in Meyer, Catherine Garcia.
Thank you very,
She's done a lot
Catherine
for the
Garcia.
people of New
Thank you
York.
very
She'd
much.
be my second choice.
We're going to wrap up this first hour of the debate on Channel 7. The Campaign Finance Board requires 1 hour debate on Channel 7 from 7 to 8. That's what's happening. But because of the number of candidates and the number of important issues the next mayor of New York is going to face, as you saw tonight, we're going to be bringing you an extra hour of questions and answers with these 8 candidates over the air on Channel 7.2 and on these cable channels that you're seeing on your screen. We'll also stream the entire debate on ABC 7 NY and all of our apps. And a reminder, beside the race for mayor, candidates for controller, public advocate, borough president, and city council also on the ballot for the city's official voter guide. Go to visitingnyc.com. Thank you for all your information. We'll see you in an hour, in 15 seconds. Welcome back to the second hour of this debate for the next mayor of New York, the 110th mayor. Challenges galore, maybe the most challenging issues that any new mayor has ever faced. And we thank you for all of us here on Channel 7 and all of our sponsors for coming back and continuing to watch here on all of our digital stations and platforms and our social media sites. We're going to start questioning. We have a lot to get through. We have 1 more hour. We thank you all for a lively debate. There was a lot of yelling, unfortunately. We're going to ask for some time. We have a little more time now to dig deep in these questions, but we do ask that one person talk at a time. It's very hard for us and, most importantly, for the viewers you are trying to talk to as voters to understand what you're saying when everyone's talking over you. We're going to start with Dave Evans for Mr. Donovan.
Well, we ended that hour on education. I think we're going to continue a little bit with education. And I wanted to ask just a couple of things, first of all, to Mr. Donovan. How do you assure to parents, since the mayor has said we're going to all be back in school this September, no remote learning, how do you assure parents that the classrooms are going to be safe? Also, and some of you touched on it in the last hour, and I wanted to hear more about how do we get back this lost year for so many students? How do we recoup that?
Well, first, we need a mayor who will actually listen to his own experts, to the scientists. If we'd started early enough when the principals and teachers said we needed to get focused on the ventilation, on looking creatively at using our communities as classrooms, our libraries and our gyms, we could have gotten open safely in September, and we need to do that now. But you're absolutely right, Dave. After this terrible year, we need to be not only focused on reopening and getting back, we need to be focused on a new status quo, a different change for our schools. And what I would do is invest in my education recovery coordinators that I've talked about, young people working side by side with our teachers, but also universal broadband in our schools, and making sure that we're better connecting our schools to jobs. Every single high school student should have at least one paid internship or apprenticeship before they graduate. I'd do that by the end of my first term.
Scott, I wanted to hear from you. You've got the teachers union backing you. This is a big issue for them.
Look, our teachers and principals and assistant principals were heroes. They took care of our kids, they took them in, and then they had to go on remote learning, and it was a very difficult situation. The next mayor has an amazing opportunity to transform our schools. The resources are being put in place, we just need a vision. Here's mine: 2 teachers in every classroom, K-5. We need to equalize after-school programs. If my kids get robotics and chess and athletics, every child should have the same opportunities in every zip code in every school. I've talked to the teachers, not just because they're endorsing me, but they believe that my education plan is what's best for the city. But here's what we also have to do. We got to smash the de Blasio bureaucracy at the Department of Education. I've done the audits. I know where the money's being wasted, and I know how to redirect that money into the classrooms. And it also is about mental health initiatives. My little child, Miles, who lost his grandmother, one day just burst into tears for the first time. He didn't have closure with his grandmother's death. His teacher was the one he went to. His teacher was the one who helped him. And that's a message for everybody.
Okay, and just a quick reminder, we're going to go to 45 seconds now on these questions. Maya, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Look, this is a year that our kids have been traumatized. I talked already about making sure that we have day one trauma-informed care in our schools, because our kids are whole people and they need that to learn. but I'm also creating a resource center and hub for teachers and administrators so we can learn best practices to accelerate learning. It's just a myth that just because a kid may be behind, they can't actually do advanced learning. We're going to pull some of that through the resource center. And look, I'm the only candidate in this race that's actually delivered free broadband, something New York City had never done before, to every single apartment at Queensbridge House, is the largest in North America, and I'm going to bring more broadband to our people.
Thank you, Mayel. Ray?
Listen, the inherent in the question is that we've started at the right place. This is systemic inequities that exist in education long before COVID. COVID exposed and exacerbated the system that we're facing in our educational system. What they've described is nice, but clearly insufficient. We need to transform the system. My Cradle to Career option, My Cradle to Career vision has the following hallmarks to it. 0 to 4, by the time many of our kids get to pre-K, they're already behind. We want to make certain we have affordable child care and the right professionals to take a look at our children. By the end of the 3rd grade, every child in New York City can read and do math. Why is that? Because between 0 and the end of the 3rd grade, our children are learning to read. After that, they're reading to learn, and we've lost far too many. 6th grade, digital and financial literacy. 8th grade, make sure that our children get exposed to different career opportunities. Each of them has a summer job.
Okay, Mr. Wire.
And they get exposed to different career opportunities. So by the time they graduate, they can do 1 of 3 things. Go into that career option, go to a 2-year or 4-year college. Cradle to Career, I've been responsible for that. You can see my plan at rayformayor.com.
Thank you, Ray. Andrew, let's hear from you about schools.
Half of our kids are still not back in school, and it's June. So we have to imagine this has been a lost year. 29% of New Yorkers don't have high-speed internet at home, primarily black and brown families. So when they come back to school, and hopefully they get started this summer, Summer Rising, summer camp plus summer school, your kids are going to love it. But what they need most is time. We have to get 10,000 tutors into our schools to try and tutor 100,000 kids to make up for this lost year. And we do need social workers and counselors because there's going to be a lot of trauma and neglect and abuse that's happened over this past number of months. It starts with a plan to get our kids back in school, though, and we need a clear vision. We have tons of federal money that's come in and needs to get deployed right now so that we have a runway so that kids are back in school in September. We can assess the damage. Unfortunately, there's a lot of damage that we're going to be undoing for months and years.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Diane, how do you get this lost year, 2020, back?
Sure. So, this is an opportunity for us to radically reimagine education. As the only former public school teacher on this panel, and also the only parent of, actually a parent of children with learning differences, I can tell you that we need to start using the city as a classroom. We should be partnering with our community-based organizations, our arts and cultural institutions, our businesses, not just to use expanded space in terms of social distancing and making sure that we are regaining the trust of our teachers, who we have fundamentally left behind and left vulnerable in this situation, but also so that we can begin to expose our children to the world so that they can begin to make active choices about their career pathways by being exposed to all that New York City has to offer. We actually need to embrace what we have available to ourselves and transform what our schools look like, what the school day looks like, and what it is that education looks like in New York City.
Thanks, Diane. Next, we're going to hear from Eric Adams.
New York, I want you to hear me. I went through my entire public school experience, going to bed at night, crying myself to sleep because I didn't feel I could learn. Finally, when I went to community college, I heard a documentary on learning disability. I learned that I had a learning disability. I was able to overcome that. I went from a D student to on the dean's list throughout my college year. I was betrayed by the Department of Education. Every day we are betraying our children. We have a city with 65% of black and brown children never reach proficiency. 30% at Rikers Island are dyslexic. The real crime is not what happens on our streets only. It is what we do every day in the Department of Education. You won't have another Eric Adams believing he can't learn when I'm the mayor of this city.
Thank you, Eric. And let's wrap up on this with Catherine Garcia. Catherine?
This has just been an incredibly traumatic year. I have nieces who are 6 and 11, and they have literally spent 15 months on a Zoom screen. It makes your eyes hurt to just think about it. Getting back into the classroom is absolutely imperative, but we also need to be looking at each kid individually. Some may have done very well in one topic and not well in another. When we group, we have to have much more individuality, and particularly for kids with special needs, making sure that they are getting the resources and the support services to come back. It is going to take all of us, their teachers, but also investments in art and music and support services so that we are dealing with their critical thinking, because we need to graduate them into a 21st century economy that is completely different than anyone on this stage went into.
Thank you, Catherine.
This is why
that's enough time. I appreciate that. Your time is up. And thank you for all your answers about education. I don't think there's any more important issue. They are the future, indeed, of our city. Before I ask Giselle to give a couple questions to all of you, I do want to get a raise of hands about a lightning round question, two of them, actually. How many of you would like to have Mayor de Blasio's endorsement for you as mayor of New York City? Please raise your hands. Mr. Yang? One. How many of you would like to have Governor Cuomo's endorsement of you for mayor of New York City? Mr. Yang, okay. Thank you very much. One more quick question. I'd like to start over here with Diane. How many of you, what kind of grade would you give Mayor de Blasio in his 8 years? And just try to make it 10 seconds. It's a pretty easy question.
Wow. So I would say that in terms of vision at the beginning of his administration, I'd probably give him an A. I think we were all very inspired about the possibilities. I think there's a difference, though, between vision and execution. And so in terms of execution, I'd probably give him somewhere around a C.
Okay. Eric?
A combination, because there were so many different issues. I would give him a B on the pre-K for all. I would give him a B on his ability to substantially decrease the over-abuse of stop, question, and frisk. He dropped the numbers substantially and kept the city safe. So I think there's a combination. You have to look at each issue and then make the determination on how you would grade him.
Ms. Garcia?
I think that we can all agree that pre-K for all was a phenomenal program. We all started with real excitement about this, but stick-with-itness to make it so that we are thinking about how are we going to get people vaccinated? How are we going to get kids back in school? These things were failures during the height of a crisis. Execution matters.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Donovan?
As someone who started volunteering in a homeless shelter in school and worked my whole career to make housing more affordable to end homelessness, we have more homeless people on our streets today than any time since the Depression, and we're on the verge of an eviction
crisis. What's the grade, sir?
So for me, it's a D.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Stringer.
You know, I'm probably the one on stage who has audited and investigated this mayor through 2 municipal corruption scandals.
And that would give him what grade?
And that, well, I'm going to get to that in 20 seconds. And while there has been a lot of promise, this is an F mayoralty because the potential and the possibilities were so great.
Ms. Wiley.
Look, I'm not going to give him a single letter grade because there are so many things that were critical for people, from universal pre-K to the first sanctuary city legislation I was proud to help push through, to making sure we had paid family leave. I have been clear, though, that he gets an F when it comes to what happened this past summer with police accountability.
Okay. Mr. McGuire.
Yeah, I would, on universal pre-K, I think that was a good start. I'd probably give him a B-. On leadership and management, leadership of the city and management of the budget, I'd probably give him unpassing.
And Mr. Yang.
My family was one of the families that benefited from universal pre-K. I think we can agree that that was Mayor de Blasio's biggest achievement. I'm going to give him an incomplete because there's still time, Bill, not to squander all of the federal money before one of us gets in there. You can still do the right thing.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the quick answers. Our next round of questioning starts with Giselle.
Thank you, Bill. I want to take this moment to speak directly to the undocumented community. We have over 700,000 undocumented immigrants in New York. They're essential workers, they are our neighbors, they are our friends. And as we all know, they were hit hard during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many were left out of economic relief programs. How would you address that? And I want to start with Scott Stringer.
You're absolutely right. The frontline heroes in this city were our essential workers, the people who were undocumented. You know, they got up every morning, they did deliveries, they went to work in so many different places. They never requested any protective gear. They just did the people's business, and they are truly heroes. And I, as mayor, will promise this directly. We are going to make sure that we make it right with our undocumented workers and essential workers. Whatever the federal government won't cover, the state government won't cover, we will use city funding to make sure that we provide a safe infrastructure for the children, affordable housing, and we will include as partners our undocumented workers. And that is a promise that I feel so strongly about because they saved lives.
Thank you.
And they gave and sacrificed their lives.
Maya Wiley.
Yeah, look, our people are all our people, whether they have papers or not. You live here, you're one of ours. And so that's why I am proud to have had the courage to confront the NYPD when they were trying to undermine the first sanctuary city law in the city. We got it passed. But it's also why I have a plan for $5,000 care grants so that our neediest families can care for themselves and their families. And that is going to include undocumented immigrants. And we're going to make sure that we're getting health insurance to our undocumented friends and neighbors, not just asking them to just try to get by with where they can go. And in a Maya Wiley administration, the NYPD will not be allowing ICE to get near any of our folks.
Thank you so much, Mr. McGuire.
You know, we're a sanctuary city. This is about respect. It's about dignity. It's about support. It's about those who have allowed this city and sacrificed for this city to be where it is as we manage through COVID. We need to do everything that we can to support the undocumented amongst us. They're New Yorkers. We need to respect them. We need to treat them with dignity. We need to make sure that they can live with dignity, and we need to do whatever we can to identify whom they are and make sure that we give them support that's necessary.
Andrew Yang, what's your take?
I'm the son of immigrants myself, and I appreciate anyone who comes to this country or New York City for a better life. I have a comprehensive anti-poverty plan that's going to put $1 billion in cash relief into the hands of the poorest New Yorkers, many of whom are undocumented. And I want to see to it that the 11% of New Yorkers right now who don't have bank accounts actually have access to financial services that won't gouge you, the way the check cashing fees and the money lenders and the pawn shop lenders and the remittance fees are taking $600 plus a year out of your hands. It should not be this expensive to be poor in New York City. I'm also starting an educational opportunity fund, $1,000 for any family with kids in public schools, an English language learner below the poverty line or has an IEP.
Thank you,
we
Mr.
can
Yang.
actually help make these people's lives better and more sustainable on the path to a good life here in New York City.
Ms. Morales, you're up
that
next.
$1 billion translates into about $5 a day.
Ms. Morales, this is your time to.
So I was proud to stand with the street vendors and make the road in advocating for the rights of our undocumented, essential and excluded workers. I think we need to make sure that anybody who lives in New York City has access to protections. We need to become a true sanctuary city. That means making sure that NYPD and all city agencies are not collaborating with ICE. It means that we should provide access to economic protections and health care because we know that they're contributing to our economy. It means that we need to advocate for their right to vote. And finally, one of the things I've called for is the implementation of the New York City 5,000 in my first 100 days of my administration, a linguistically and culturally appropriate core of staff that will be dispersed across the city to assess the disparities around COVID-19 and health care and vaccinations and make sure that all of our communities have access to the protections that they need.
Eric Adams, you're up next. Thank you, Ms. Morales.
You know, my mother worked 2 jobs to provide for the 6 of us, and we had a group of undocumented residents that lived in our community. And I thought about that when COVID hit this city. And many people fled, and I led. I led with those undocumented workers because I saw and I thought about what my mother went through and how we need to ensure that they receive health care, that they receive protection, that we make sure that ICE is never in a position to partner with the police department and harm them in any way. But we also need to make sure that we treat them the dignity and respect that they deserve. And on behalf of all those that I knew in my household and on my block, I say that I stood with you during COVID-19. I didn't flee this city when you needed us.
Garcia, what's your vision for the undocumented community?
We have to be a true sanctuary city. We have to live up to our values, which means making investments in families, regardless of documentation. That means having the money come from the state, and if not from the city, to make up for the gap that they were not eligible for. But it also means that we have to prioritize health, housing, education for those who are undocumented. I was there on the front lines during COVID. We set up programs that were very intentional about not creating a screen for documentation. That no matter who you are, if you were a New York City resident and you called and you said you were hungry, we were there for you. But in addition, we were working with the essential workers, with the grocery stores,
Thank you,
with
Ms.
the
Garcia.
distributors, because we wanted to help keep them safe during the height of the pandemic.
Sean Donovan, let's wrap it up with you.
You know, I'm the son of an immigrant who grew up in Costa Rica and Lima, Peru. And I know that this city has been built by immigrants, and we must help our immigrants who have been hardest hit by this crisis. So a year ago, I programmed to start feeding those who were going hungry, cooked from hot, fresh meals from neighborhood restaurants. I understand that we must invest in our immigrants, but here's the thing. In the wake of the worst pandemic we've seen in our lifetimes, healthcare is the single most important thing we can do for undocumented. They're already going to our emergency rooms. I'm the only candidate with a true public option that would allow the 300,000 undocumented folks who don't have health insurance to get it and get good, culturally appropriate care in their communities.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do something a little differently on this part of the debate, and I appreciate all your answers, and they've been very interesting. I think they're helping people make up their mind and give them insight into what you believe and what you're proposing. In this round, we are asking each of you to question one other candidate. Before I get to the rules, I would like to ask, please, for our cameras, tell us right away who the question is for, and we'll get the camera right there. We would like relatively short questions and relatively 45-second answers, if possible. We're going to reverse the order this time again. We're going to start on this side with Mr. Yang. And just tell us first, Mr. Yang, who you would like to address your cross-examination or cross-question
I'd like to ask Eric a question.
Go ahead.
The camera over.
Camera's on the way.
Fantastic. Eric, we've seen on a national level what happens when someone doesn't accept the result of an election. You're one of the only candidates here tonight who is not already committed to accepting the outcome of the ranked choice voting election that's taking place in June. Will you make that commitment tonight?
I'm sorry, Andrew, I didn't hear your question. You got to talk a little louder.
Oh, sorry, Eric.
Yeah.
My question is whether you would commit to accepting the outcome of a ranked choice voting election later this month.
Yes, of course I would. I didn't understand why, but of course I would. This is our process. I believe in respecting the process. I believe in respecting the process so much that I stay within my 1 minute.
45 seconds, actually. Mr. McGuire, your question?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Scott Stringer a question.
Scott Stringer, all right.
Has to do with pensions. Scott, you clearly manage a pension for lots of New Yorkers. Now you've taken on more risk and increased amount of fees paid to those who are risk takers, and you have 30% lower returns than your comparisons. How can New Yorkers trust that you have the capacity to manage the budget?
Well, first of all, when I became controller, I literally cleaned up the back office of the pension system, and we made the changes necessary that actually exceeded, Ray, our actuarial target. As you well know, my job is to manage a $240 billion pension fund and protect the retirement security of 700,000 individuals. And we didn't just hit our 9% target, we actually exceeded 9%. This in the midst of COVID. And the reason we did it is in part because we have excellent trustees, but also because I put in place reforms consolidating the 5 different pension systems into one investment meeting. Ray, that was never done before. Mayors and controllers past talked about it, and I actually got it done with our trustees. So if anything, I would say to you, our pension fund is one of the most successful in the country. We implemented reforms and changes. It grew to $240 billion and set a course of financial stability to our city workers.
Appreciate
You've taken on more risk and generated lower returns.
You only take on risk if you don't hit your target, right?
But
we hit our
lower returns
we,
than your
we have a
peers.
varied asset. We have a very varied asset allocation. We work with our trustees so that we hedge against the good and the bad. And as a result of these reforms and very smart investing, and remember, Ray, we invest for the long term. We're not trying to game the system. This isn't Atlantic City. We come in and we look at a long-term financial plan.
Appreciate
but
the
you're
question.
lower than your benchmarks, and you're taking on more risk.
We hit our 7% and exceeded it.
And you've taken on more risk. You paid more fees. And you're lower than your benchmarks. You have lower returns with more risk.
Actually, when you have a large pension fund, that's not a fair comparison. But we did, as controller, attack those fees and worked out a lot of ways to reduce them. And remember, we do rely on people to invest our money. But I've set this office on a path where hopefully we'll be doing our own investments.
Appreciate the question and the answer, Mr. McGuire and Mr. Stringer.
Because I've been one of the most successful controllers as it relates to the pension.
And we're going to end it right there. Thank you, guys, gentlemen, and very much. And Ms. Wiley, you're going to have the next question. To whom?
My question is for Eric Adams. And as I want the audience to understand the question, Mr. Adams has said he's carried a gun to church. He's asked off-duty officers to carry guns to church. He said he will carry a gun as mayor and maybe even ditch his detail. Eric, isn't this the wrong message to send our kids? We're telling not to pick up the guns.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Wiley. Let's be clear. When we look at the record on ending the overproliferation of guns in the state of New York, you have to say Eric Adams. The legislation I passed and pushed in Albany to deal with high-speed ammunition, the conversation around doing what's called snug, is called guns backwards. I fought for that funding. When you look at my voice throughout my entire career of public safety, that has been my message, that public safety is a prerequisite to prosperity. I'm clear on that message, and I'm just so happy that we have something called Google now, because people can actually go back and look at what I have done in this city and in this state around public safety. I send the right message
Eric,
all the time, and I'm going to continue to do that,
Eric,
and I'm proud of it.
I'm a mom in a community where we have high rates of gun violence, and it's just this simple. We don't want guns all over our city with off-duty police officers carrying guns into our churches. It's
15 seconds, Mr.
He may be backing now.
Well, let's be clear. When anyone on this stage is a mayor, and you walk into a church, a synagogue, a mosque, you know those guys that are walking in with you? You know what they're carrying? They're carrying guns.
And they're on duty. And they're a detail to protect the mayor. Not someone off-duty walking around with guns.
Let me share this with you. Let me share this with you, because I really want you to understand this issue.
This is the last, and this will be the last part.
Off-duty, transit cop. I hear an Asian hate crime taking place. I'm off-duty, on the train. I hear the yell of the Chinese man. He was being assaulted and robbed because he was Chinese. I was off duty. I was able to stop those armed perpetrators from carrying out their actions while off duty. The state law states that a police officer can carry off duty because he has to respond 24 hours a day to any crime that's taking place in the city. And I'm proud of every time I do that.
We also had an off-duty officer shoot his friend and murder him on carrying his gun off duty.
All right, thank you very much.
We also had five people shot and killed in Bushwick. Illegal guns are illegal guns. People who are well-trained and could be held accountable.
And children
That's the right
see
thing
their
to do.
role models carrying guns may think it's okay for them.
All right, and we certainly do. And listen, we're all appalled by the gun insanity that is happening in this city this year. Mr. Stringer, you're next, sir. And who are you going to talk to?
All right, I'm going to go with Eric Adams.
Okay. Mr. Adams.
Eric.
Yes, I'm very popular.
I got one, too. In all seriousness, two major hedge fund Republican billionaires gave $1 million to your super PAC. $1 million. They are people who want to privatize public education, and they're among the largest Republican donors. They also gave the same amount of money to another super PAC run by Andrew Yang's people. What do you think about the hedge funders hedging on you?
Well, Scott, you know that we are not allowed to collaborate with any independent expenditure, any PACs. We can't do that. And I am not in charge of who puts together these PACs and IEs. And remember something that many people forget. I am the only candidate in this race that called for 100% public financing. I would write a check today and give back every dollar I raised over the 35,000 calls I made and the hundreds of fundraisers. I would give that money back to go to a 100% public finance system so whoever is capable of running could run it. I want all of you to join me on this.
My friend,
join
Eric, that's
me
not,
on calling.
that's not the
Scott, let me finish my point.
That's not the question.
Join me on calling for a 100% public finance system. So I don't control the hedge funds. Okay. I don't control who donated in the past.
Mr. Stringer, you have 15 seconds to respond.
I don't control that. You know I don't.
But that's not.
And I can't participate in that.
But that's not the question.
But when I look over your account, Scott,
I just want to ask you, what do you think about the fact that these hedge funders are financing your campaign? These are people who are pro-charter school, private education. But I want to know, because it is public record, I'm not saying that you violated the law. I did not say that. I just want to know what you think that Yang is getting the same bet too. And how do you feel about it?
You have 15 seconds to respond.
Here's my response, Scott. I don't control them. But you control the people who you stated you would not get money from, such as developers. But when I started looking over your list, you know what I saw, Scott? I saw the people you said you wouldn't get money from. Give it back, Scott.
Eric, you've done more pay-to-play development. You do not want to have this conversation.
But give the money back that you received.
You do not want to start talking about your development projects and your federal, state, and city interactions.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much for that interchange. Sean Donovan, you're next, and who are you to ask a question of?
To Andrew Yang.
Mr. Yang.
Andrew, you've said you want to be the anti-poverty mayor, but you've proposed a so-called universal basic income that certainly isn't universal. It'll reach just a few New Yorkers. Maybe I would describe it as basic, but here's the thing. If we're really going to solve poverty in this city, we need to get at the wealth gap. I have an equity bonds plan that would get every child born into poverty in this city $50,000 by the time they graduate high school. And my plan wouldn't take away money from other programs that these families depend on. So how can you say you want to be the anti-poverty mayor with supplying less than $200 a month and taking money away from other programs? Is this another false promise?
Thank you, Sean. Again, I want people to reflect on the fact that a lot of people thought something like cash relief nationwide pipe dream until we got the $1,200 check, the $600 check, the $1,400 check, which my organization, Humanity Forward, directly lobbied for. And we can make New York City the anti-poverty city, starting with $1 billion down payment in cash relief to help the people who are struggling the most stay in stable and secure environments.
Why make it down payment?
Then get financial services to the 11% of people that don't have them, high-speed internet to the 29% of people that don't have them, grocery stores in the food deserts, bus lanes to the transit deserts. There are a lot of ways that we can combat poverty, Sean, but we have to start by making a commitment. And the $1 billion to me is just a start. It's just a down payment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yang. Catherine Garcia, to whom would you like to address your question?
Scott Stringer.
Scott Stringer, all right.
Scott, over the course of your almost 8 years as controller, you've done more than 400 audits. You have audited the NYPD twice. They are 5% of the budget and 15% of the workforce. In comparison, you audited the Parks Department 21 times. Why did you not have more of a focus on the NYPD and if you're considering the amount of money that they actually control in the budget?
We did audit the police department a number of times. Some agencies, my turn to answer. Some agencies we did more, some agencies we did less. But here's what we were able to do with the NYPD that was more powerful than the audit. For the first time, we were able to bring them online so that we could actually see the contracts. And that was a fight that I won. We beat the de Blasio administration, got the NYPD for the first time. You can go on Checkbook and actually see those contracts, which means we now have more ways to look there. The second thing I did with the NYPD is I initiated something called ClaimStat because I wanted them to acknowledge and understand where the claims against police officers were coming from. It was the first time ever a controller was able to do that. And I also ended the MOU once and for all that the de Blasio administration, your administration, put forth that continued allowing the NYPD to buy hardware in secret without any oversight. I teared up that agreement, and there's a new day.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. Mr. Adams, to whom would you like to address?
To Andrew.
Mr. Yang.
Andrew, and it really impacted me when I saw you do a press conference after there was a shooting blocks from your home. So you were late on responding to the gun violence in the city. Your company discriminated against people of color. You left the city during a very difficult time, even during a time when I did not see my son over 2 months because I was in the street during COVID. You did not vote in municipal elections at all. I just don't know, how the hell do we have you become our mayor with this record like this? How do you govern a diverse city like this? I just can't get it.
Eric, New Yorkers know exactly what I've been up to the past several years. I started an anti-poverty movement that has helped millions of New Yorkers in our time of need, and I moved to Georgia to help win the Senate. Can you all imagine what we'd be facing right now if Mitch McConnell were still the Senate Majority Leader instead of New York's own Chuck Schumer? That has given us a lifeline, an opportunity to actually get out of this crisis. I'm proud of that work. I'm proud to have been an official surrogate for the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris campaign to get Trump out. And now, Eric, we need to turn the page on the people who've been running our city into the ground for the last number of years. And you talk about public safety and security in these shootings. Again, 3 out of 4 shootings in Brooklyn are going unsolved right now. You're the Brooklyn borough president. You know, the problems have been getting worse around you while you've been running for mayor and raising money from your friends in real estate. So if you get a choice between Eric Adams for mayor or Andrew Yang for mayor, I think New Yorkers are going to choose Andrew Yang because they know we need a fresh start. We need to turn the page on what has not been working.
No, well, the problem was getting worse because you weren't on the ground. You started discovering NYCHA when you were running for mayor. You just started discovering violence when you were running for mayor. You started discovering the homeless crisis when you're running for mayor. You can't run from the city, Andrew, if you want to run the city. I was here on the ground for 35 uninterrupted years. You know you were not. And so let's be honest about that. So why should we trust you now? You may flee again during a difficult time. I never fled the city. I protected the city. I wore a bulletproof vest for 22 years and protected the children and families of this city. You cannot say anywhere near that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Yang, quick 15-second response.
Sure. Eric, we all know that you've been investigated for corruption everywhere you've gone. City, state, even Barack Obama's Department of Justice investigated you. You've achieved the rare trifecta of corruption investigations. Is that really what we want in the next mayor? You think you're going to enter City Hall and it's going to be different? We all know it's going to be exactly the same. That's why so many people on the stage don't want you to be mayor.
So many people on the stage, I guess they want you to be mayor? What am I missing here? Andrew,
I think you're both right. You both shouldn't be mayor.
Let's be clear on something, Andrew. There was no investigation that came up and said Eric did anything wrong. And you should never get in a point as a person of color that's wrongly accused often in this country, you should never get in a point that to determine that because someone reviews something that they did something wrong. And you should apologize.
Gentlemen, I think
you should apologize for making that comment.
Saying that this is simply because you're black, I just don't think it's correct, given that
I didn't say
there are other candidates of color on the stage who have not been the subject of the investigations that you have. Front page news of the New York Times, broke the CFB's fundraising rules. Like everywhere you've gone, Eric, people look and see that you don't pay attention to the rules of the road. You're unprincipled. You actually advised New Yorkers last summer to go confront their neighbors over illicit fireworks, and a woman followed your advice, Shatavia Walls, and she lost her life. Like Maya said, you told the orders to bring a gun to a place of worship, and we all know that's the wrong order.
Mr. Yang, hold on
Andrew,
for a second.
that's
15
inaccurate.
seconds.
If you were here, you would know exactly what happened, and that's inaccurate. And so throwing out things that are inaccurate is not making them right in the process.
But
what I laid out to you
these
was
personal
accurate.
attacks have nothing to do with how we're going to run this city and make it better. Zero to do. These are all ad hominem attacks, and the New Yorkers are not benefiting from it.
Thank you very much.
So we need to move forward.
Let's move on forward to Diana Morales. And Ms. Morales, tell us who you're going to cross interview.
I'm going to ask a question of Eric.
Yes.
Mr. Adams. Well, he hasn't had any questions yet so far.
No,
so that's
I know.
Good.
So, Eric, it's Pride Month. And a lot of people know that I've been an ally and support the Black trans movement and decriminalizing sex work. But in 2019, you commented on an affordable housing development for LGBTQ seniors not belonging in the community. I'd like for you to explain what it was that you meant by that comment and how it is that the LGBT community can count on having a place in your New York City as mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's be clear. I put hundreds of thousands of dollars in that amazing project. And the organizer of that project, they have communicated with me often. We have a great relationship. I also put about $1 million into the project at the Brooklyn Armory, which is the Pride. Brooklyn Pride takes place all the time in the borough of Brooklyn. This is what I was pointing out. On that site is on NYCHA's ground. And the residents of NYCHA stopped and spoke with me. They stated, we want to also see good housing in our grounds, renovation. We don't want a building that's dilapidated. We have abandoned NYCHA, and that was the comment I made at that event. But I have an amazing support of the Pride in the borough of Brooklyn, and will continue to have that.
Thank you, sir, and thank you all for coming up with interesting questions, and it made for a fascinating round. And I appreciate it. We're going to start with another round, and I want to ask you guys this directly about, it's a crime thing. It's going to go to Wiley, Maya Wiley first, Ms. Wiley. I want to talk specifically about crime in the subways. We've talked about crime about a lot. I want to get, this is 30 seconds answers. We want to get several more questions in the next 19 minutes we have. The MTA wants more cops. We have seen subway crime go way up, and we also have seen ridership not anywhere near where it should be, to where we need it to be to get jobs and workers back in this city. If we don't stop these crimes, people will not feel safe in the subways. There's just no question about that. It will not take them to work. That will only hurt our recovery. If you're elected, Ms. Wiley, how will you try to fix this in the first 100 days, especially what you're proposing to the NYPD?
When I am mayor, safety is job one, and I'm going to keep New Yorkers safe, but I'm going to do it the right way. So imagine going down into the subway, and before you have to fear whether someone attacks you because they're mentally ill and need help, we're going to make sure that there is a team of crisis responders who help our people who need help by getting them into the programs that also keep them off the subway, but also meet their human rights. It's the right way to do it. We will still have the transit police. There will still be someone to call if that backup is necessary, but this will make us safer, but it will also help the people who deserve help.
Thank you. Mr. McGuire, what would you do in your first 100 days to make the subway safe?
First, we need to make sure that the subways are safe. We do have a preponderance of those who are mentally ill. My plan, which I've outlined, which you can see at readyformayor.com, is to invest in making certain we execute on Kendra's law. As you know, the courts have allowed us to intervene with those who have prescribed medicines. Today, we have $1.3 million out of $240 million associated with what we call the assistant outpatient treatment. I'd focus on that. I'd focus on, in my policing plan, emergency social services, so we'd have mental health care professionals in the subway along with police.
Okay, Mr. Yang, more cops in the subway?
Yes, more cops in the subway. But one of the frustrations New Yorkers feel right now is that it's not even 100% clear who's responsible for our safety on the subways, because you have hundreds of MTA cops who report to the state. It's one reason we saw this back and forth between the mayor and the governor. You need one person who's accountable. It should be the mayor. We need more cops on the subways. And those cops need to not just be on the platform. They need to make visual inspections going back and forth down the subway cars so that people see them and they spot anything that's going wrong. We do need to reduce street homelessness. It overlaps with the problems on our subways. There are many mentally ill people in New York City right now that are not getting the help that they need. One of them just brutally punched an Asian woman in downtown New York just a couple of days ago. That person needed to be getting the care and not be on our streets or our subways where they can harm somebody.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Morales, your first 100 days, what would you do?
So let me just be clear. New York City has the most bloated police budget in the country, if not the world. If there were, in fact, a correlation between policing and safety, we'd be the safest city in the world. But the reality of it is that that is not the case. We need to deploy the appropriate services and responses to deal with the crisis. So we need to, that's why I've called for the creation of a community first responders department. And we can provide trained, skilled people who are able to intervene and de-escalate and would serve as part of a larger ecosystem of human service providers, of mental health providers, of housing providers, of medical providers, so that we're actually connecting those people with the services that they need to address the crisis at hand.
Okay,
we need to actually help people make progress and move out of the conditions that keep them in the status quo right now. And that is what we need to do moving forward.
Eric Adams, in your first 100 days, you're a former cop. How would you do it differently?
A combination, and also I'm a former transit police officer, so I was in the subway system during some of the most difficult years, and I know what it's like. Number one, proper deployment of the police that are there. We should not have police officers congregating around the token booth. We should have a police officer on every train. Number two, Diane is right. We should team up with mental health professionals so they can be there and be proactive, not reactive. And then we need to build trust again and bring all those officers who are doing clerical duties. Instead, we need to put them back into the subway system and do what we hired them to do in the first place. But if you see someone on the station or on a train that is dealing with mental health illnesses, we should deploy mental health professionals there to assist them to get the services they need.
Ms. Garcia, in your 100 days, first 100 days, what would you do?
On my first day on the job, this is something we have to tackle. People not feeling safe on the subway makes it impossible for us to get back on our feet coming out of COVID. We have to be compassionate, which means having mental health professionals who will make a determination and get people the treatment that they need. We have to have crisis teams. We need to be using Kendra's law. We also need PD to actually patrol the system, which means walking the platforms, riding the actual trains, not just standing around. And on that first day, we will start building the 10,000 units of supportive housing we need. And I know how to get that done because I've built $8 billion of capital construction in the course of my career.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Donovan.
You know, Bill, the other day I was getting off the subway and a young man named Willie Boyd walked up to me. And he told me that his father had been a veteran who'd fallen into substance abuse and mental health challenges, but that his life had been saved by supportive housing that we'd built, a part of our plan to end homelessness in this country. We need to commit to creating supportive housing to ensure that those struggling with mental health aren't on our subways creating violence on our streets. The number of individuals sleeping on our streets, our subways, has doubled under Mayor de Blasio. The other thing we need to do is make sure that every time someone leaves Rikers or the mental health wing of one of our public hospitals, they're directed immediately to the housing they need. That's called a coordinated entry system, and I've built them with mayors across this country and here in New York City. I can do that as mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Stringer, get the last word on this.
Look, when I was growing up, the A train that I took was a rolling crime scene. And my mother would say to me, whatever you do, just sit in the conductor car. And so for a generation of kids, we were all crowded into this one conductor car. We're not there at that time period anymore, but we also have to be mindful that we do have to keep our subways safe. But here's the false choice. Everybody keeps running towards flooding the zone with cops. And that's not what's going to solve the problem. The problem is how we have a multifaceted approach. How do we address mental health issues? People literally living in the subway system. They're living in subway cars. We need to build housing. Bill de Blasio built unaffordable housing. He did everything about homelessness except build homes. My housing plan is going to speak to building supportive housing, 10,000 units a year, and giving land back to the community-based organizations, land that the city owns, with a redirected subsidy. And this is why this is going to matter for the people above ground and below ground.
Appreciate that very much, and thank you for all your answers. We're approaching a kind of a time limit here. They've got 12 minutes left, less than that. We want to have time for a 1-minute closing statement as well. So these next 2 rounds for David and Giselle, I'd like to have 30-second answers, and I'm going to start with Dave. David?
In the last year, we've seen some horrific hate crimes, anti-Semitic attacks, anti-Asian attacks. On Monday, police arrested a suspect in the assault of a 55-year-old Asian woman in Chinatown. The suspect, he is a homeless man with 17 prior convictions, many of them for felony assaults. How do you keep these people off the streets? How do you keep them in jail? And we're going to start this with Ray McGuire. Ray?
You know, I've talked about the assisted outpatient treatment, which allows us to enforce Kendra's law. Today, out of a $240 million budget, we put in $1.3 million. I would increase that at least to $5 million as needed. That's number one. Number two, we also have safe beds. We need to increase the number of safe beds. During a time of challenge, we decrease those safe beds by 600 or so safe beds. We also have assertive community treatment, outpatient, where we have those who interact frequently with those who are mentally ill to make certain that they're taking their medication. So I've included this in my plan for how we deal with those who are mentally ill with dignity, but make sure those who are a threat to themselves and a threat to New Yorkers are taken off the streets, put into safe homes, and given their medication.
Andrew?
The gentleman's name is Alex Wright, and in the past year, he threw a hot cup of coffee at a traffic agent, threw an object through a window, scratched a man's eye on the Upper East Side, punched another person. He should not have been on our streets. Our city failed the woman who was assaulted by him a couple of days ago. We have to stop failing our people and our families. So we have to examine all of the rules that let this man walk our streets, whether it's the DA, the judge, the rules on holding people, the rules on holding people who are mentally ill and could be destructive. But the Alex Wrights of New York City should not be anywhere near our streets where they can harm someone. And we have to look at every step in the process to make sure that we get the safety we deserve.
Diane?
Listen, mental illness is not a crime. We actually need to provide the appropriate supports and services to our mentally ill. That means supportive housing. As someone who has actually operated and provided supportive housing to people with mental illness, I can tell you that it makes a significant difference to have a secure and stable roof over your head, to have support with counseling, to have medication management, to have access to constructive ways in which to engage in society and be productive in society. This is what we need to do. We cannot continue criminalizing being black and brown, criminalizing mental illness, criminalizing having substance abuse issues. That is not the answer
Thank you,
for
Diane.
creating a safe city.
Thank you, Dan. Can we hear from Eric?
Clearly, we have to go upstream. I use this term all the time. We keep pulling people out of the river instead of going upstream and preventing them from falling in the first place. We have a revolving door system where instead of investing into organizations like Fountain House, where you get the wraparound services, make sure people get the necessary medical and psychological assistance, stop closing psychiatric beds in our hospitals. That's why I was proud to join NISNA as we protested the closing of these beds. And then let's make sure that we focus on giving those wraparound services so that we can give them people the care that they deserve.
Thank you. Catherine?
So I believe that we need to be very caring for the people who are mentally ill, but we also need to be caring for the victims. This was a woman, if you've watched that video, it is absolutely traumatizing for the watcher. Imagine what she is going through. We cannot have people with serious mental health issues on our streets without addressing them. And that means getting them into the treatment that they need so that they can stabilize. It is not okay to have folks violently attacking people at 6:15 in the evening. You know, I have young adult children. I don't want them to have to relearn the strategies that I had in 1970s and 1980s Brooklyn.
Thank you,
but we
Catherine.
can do it with compassion by using Kendra's law.
Sean?
I joined leaders in Chinatown today to raise our voices against hatred in this city, and I am outraged by the attacks that we've seen against our Asian American, our Jewish brothers and sisters in this city. And so we do need to strengthen our efforts to fight hate in this city. That's something that I did as housing secretary. I led the way on enforcing the Fair Housing Act to make sure that everyone could live wherever they choose, free from hatred and discrimination. But I also know, as I said a few moments ago, that ending the challenges around mental health, we have seen real failure in this city. We must invest in supportive housing. We must invest in 15-minute neighborhoods that include emergency mental health services and response in every single neighborhood to ensure we're dealing with this epidemic of mental health that is putting too many people at risk.
Thank you, Sean. Scott?
You know, Catherine, just to talk about the de Blasio administration for a second, because you've been part of it. What were people thinking when this administration started to double the spending on homelessness from $1.6 billion to $3.2 billion and not reduce homelessness and not build the housing that we actually needed over the last 8 years? Tonight, 60,000 people, 30,000 our children, will sleep in some of the most dangerous shelters that I've audited. And nothing has changed. And this administration has not measured programs to scale up success.
Scott,
and the next mayor has to do that.
Scott,
Can I jump in there, since I think he was actually...
We got to run on.
I'm sorry, but like everyone else during this has been able to get in here.
15 seconds, Scott.
As you know well, I had absolutely nothing to do with homelessness in this city during the de Blasio
but you had to
administration.
be there. And
But I have been on the front lines. I have a strong plan to make sure that we are addressing this on day one and turning back the clock on the $3 billion that is being wastefully spent, which is why I got endorsed by the New York Times and the Daily News, because I have the track record to actually solve really difficult problems.
You were there. I was just asking if you had any observations.
Maya, go ahead.
You know, hate can't have a home in New York City, and it was awful what happened to that woman. The system failed both of them. The largest psychiatric facility we have in this city is Rikers Island. That is not taking the courage that we need to fix what's broken. And that's why I have the courageous plan that says we will end street homelessness, and we will do it the right way. It will include making sure we have crisis intervention and supportive housing, and we will keep people safe as well.
Thank you, Ms. Wiley. Our next question is from Yuzella. Let me just ask, this is our final question, and I'd like to have the answers be 30 seconds if we could. We are going to run over as it is. We want to give you 1 minute to wrap up and make your closing statements. Yuzella?
Thank you, Bill. Let's talk childcare. Before the pandemic, less than 10% of New York City families could afford childcare. Many parents, right, have been forced to choose between bringing home the paycheck or caring for their children. Will you support a universal childcare plan? And if so, how will you pay for it?
Mr. Yang.
This is yet another reason we should be thrilled to have Joe Biden as president and Chuck Schumer as Senate Majority Leader, because they've just put out a comprehensive plan that could put hundreds of millions of dollars to work here in New York City, helping get child care right here paid for by the feds. So what we have to do to get this federal money is we have to make it easier to qualify. And right now, Yusel, you know that there are so many child care providers that are just the apartment downstairs in the apartment building. The person may not speak English. We have to get that person the license they need so that they can qualify for federal funding. And then we can actually get child care to people in a way that's affordable and builds on what's already happening in our neighborhoods and communities.
Ms. Morales?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Will you support a universal child care plan?
Oh, a universal child care plan. Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important for us, in order to recover and create a new economy for the people, we absolutely have to invest in job creation. And I believe that the care economy, which child care is a critical part of, is a critical thing that we need to actually invest in moving forward. That includes child care, it includes early childhood education, it includes our home health aides, it includes our elder care. Those are all of the critical roles that we know kept us moving during the course of COVID-19, and that are critical to us being able to operate in the city and rebuild our economy and go back to work.
Mr. Eric Adams?
Yes, I do believe in universal child care. And, you know, my oldest sister lost her entire childhood raising the five of us. And we not only stopped the movement of families, but, you know, mom doing 2 jobs and my older sister having to just lose her entire childhood. Universal child care is crucial. Universal tutorial is crucial. Early childhood development is crucial. We need to really start investing in families in a real way.
Garcia?
Don't betray families like they betrayed mine.
Garcia?
This has been an incredible challenge for all families, but particularly for women. I am supportive of free childcare for those 0 to 3 for people making under $70,000. This is already going to be tremendously expensive. We have costed it at about $675 million a year, but it is the right thing to do for our kids, and it is the right thing to do for our families, because I've been there. I know what it's like to have to try and come up with the money so that I could go to work when my kids were little.
Sean Donovan?
I give credit to Bill de Blasio for having made progress on universal pre-K. But we have to finish the job and get to universal 3K in our city and universal child care. And it's not just about quantity, it's also about quality. Too many of our neighborhood-based and family-based centers don't have the resources they need. So I would work with the Biden administration at this New Deal moment to get that funding. No one else in this race has the deep relationships and knowledge as budget director to understand how to get those resources and put them to work here to give our families real hope and opportunity.
Scott Stringer?
Well, first of all, those resources have already arrived. And I have
Actually,
a plan.
the family plan that President Biden is proposing hasn't even gone to Congress yet.
But we've got a down payment of $2.4 billion.
Respond.
But here's my plan. It's called NYC Under 3. And we are going to have federal funding, I believe, for it. And we have to do a couple things. First, we have to recognize that 0 to 3 is where 80% of brain development happens. So this is no longer a luxury. It has become a necessity for our children. Under my plan, we would triple the number of kids in childcare. And then my plan would send 20,000 people, mostly women of color, back into the workforce. We also have to close childcare deserts because even if we can find childcare, even if we can afford childcare, we can't find it.
Maya Wiley?
You know, I have 2 beautiful daughters and have always been a working mother, and was fortunate that my mother lived with us as part of my child care solution, except then my mother got Alzheimer's. And I'm grateful that I was able to keep her home for 6 years, but it was the members of 1199 SEIU, our essential workers, that helped me. But I was fortunate. So that's why I'm creating universal care centers that recognize it's child care and care for our elderly family members as well. And that's also our care grants.
We'll finish it up with you, Mr. McGuire.
You know, I am the son of a now 95-year-old woman who worked 3 jobs. So I know what it's like to make sure that we have our grandparents in our home. And today, many of our children don't have that option, don't have that opportunity. So as part of my fundamental part of my education plan, I want to start at 0, go to 3, as I've outlined, and make sure that essential to that is affordable child care. So yes, unequivocally, I am supportive. We need to make sure that we just don't fudge the funds, but make sure that we actually deliver the funds. The funds are available. And if not available, given that I know how to manage a $90-some-odd billion budget, we can make the funds available. There's no higher priority than this.
Thank you all very much. It is now time for closing statements. And candidates, you have 1 minute each. We're going to begin in different kind of order now with Sean Donovan. Mr. Donovan, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Bill, for having us here tonight. Look, I love this city, and I owe everything to New York. I am the son of an immigrant who came and found success in our city. But all around me growing up, I saw so many families that weren't finding that opportunity. I saw homelessness exploding on our streets. I saw communities like the South Bronx and Central Brooklyn literally burning to the ground. And that lit a fire in me to go to work on behalf of the city that I love. That started a 30-year career helping our neighborhoods and our city rebuild from crisis after crisis, from Sandy, from the Great Recession, and so many others. But here's the thing. At this moment of crisis, we need a mayor who will bring three things. The bold ideas to make sure we not just recover to the old status quo, but that we build back a city that works for everyone. A mayor with the experience to make that vision real, and a mayor who brings change from the last 8 years. That's what I'm offering as mayor, not just to repair and rebuild this city, but to reimagine it as a city that works for everyone.
Mr. Donovan, thank you very much. Next in this random order of drawn names, Catherine Garcia with her closing statement.
You know, I want to thank our moderators and my opponents for a great debate this evening. We've heard a lot of good ideas, but good ideas are one thing, but if you have no execution, it doesn't really help the city. That's why the New York Times and the Daily News endorse me, because they know that I can deliver on solving the tough problems. I know that we don't need a politician right now. And perhaps from this stage, maybe you will agree with me. When you go in to cast your ballot on June 22nd, who do you trust? Who do you trust to deliver affordable housing, to bring back business, to make sure our schools really thrive? I am asking you for your #1 vote on the ballot on June 22nd, because I'm here to deliver for you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Next up, Mr. Ray McGuire.
New York, we have, amongst my opponents, decades of government experience. They fail. It's time to move on. New York City needs a leader in whom they can trust and whom they can believe. Now is not the time to continue to run this bad movie. We cannot afford to have a disastrous sequel now playing at City Hall, and we're at risk of having the same thing going forward if we rely on those people who have been in government for all these years who've yet to fix the problems. My comeback plan is one that will deliver safe streets, make sure that we have the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback plan in the history of this city. And yes, I'm going to get our children educated, which seems not to be much of an issue today, and that is the future of New York City. And we got to take care of our elderly. Ray McGuire, I look for your vote for #1. I'm the change that you can vote for. I'm the change that you can believe in.
Mr. McGuire, thank you very much. Next up, with 1 minute of closing statement, Scott Stringer.
Well, first of all, thank you for giving all of us this wonderful opportunity. You know, running for mayor, every morning, I have an opportunity to look in the eyes of my 2 little children. And I want them to have a city that is livable and safe, and a city that they can realize all of their dreams. I worry about the children who are in homeless shelters and the kids who are in public housing who don't have resources. We have to finally change this if we're going to be the aspirational city we claim to be. We lost 32,000 people to COVID. A lot of people think that we're about to go back to the roaring 20s. We're not. We have a lot of work to do, especially in communities of color and especially in marginalized communities. And this is going to be a mayoralty that's like none other. The next 4 years will determine the next 25 years. And I would say that now is not the time for a mayoralty on training wheels. We need government experience who can get to work ready on day one to figure out our homeless crisis, to invest in universal child care and public education. We cannot ruin this amazing opportunity. This is our transformative moment. I'm ready for that job, ready on day one.
Mr. Stringer, thank you very much. For a 1 minute closing statement, Diane Morales.
Thank you. So, you know, years ago, this broke single mom with a child on her hip at the supermarket decided that I was never going to let anyone tell me who I could be in this world. I could fall, I could get up, and I could do better. A few weeks ago, my son graduated college, and God willing, my daughter will next year as well. I'm not perfect. My campaign has not been perfect. But when I shared my story a couple of weeks ago about being harassed and intimidated by a city worker, I was overwhelmed by the support I got from across the city, from other New Yorkers who had had very similar experiences. And that just affirmed my commitment to transforming the injustices and the indignities that so many New Yorkers are subjected to by our very city systems. We've got to recognize that the vulnerabilities that COVID-19 exposed existed long before the pandemic. But we can fall, we can get up, and we can do better. As mayor, we can build a new New York City that lets everyone live in dignity, and we can live up to the rhetoric of being the greatest city in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. Andrew Yang, 1 minute for a closing statement.
New York City, it's been great being with you tonight. I hope the Knicks are winning. When I visit neighborhoods all around New York, you tell me what you care most about. Public safety, jobs, homelessness, schools, the trash piling up higher than ever. And you say to me very often, I'm grateful, you say, I'm voting for you because we need a change. But the other sentiment I get all the time is that we feel like we're on the outside looking in of our own government. And that's whether you're in Soundview, East Harlem, Flatbush, Richmond Hill. So the question is, if our government's not working for us, who is it working for? And so many voters see that I represent a chance to truly turn the page. I am so grateful to have more individual grassroots donors from New York City than anyone else on this stage. This is our chance, our once-in-a-generation chance to wrest control of our city's government from the special interests who are going to run it into the ground and then make the city work for us, the people and families of New York.
Mr. Yang, thank you. By the way, the Knicks highlights will be on Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock during sports. Maya Wiley, 1 minute for a closing statement.
Well, I, too, want to thank ABC for the bravery to have us all here in person. And to New Yorkers, this is a crossroads, and it is one that requires courage, not for caretaking management. I am going to have the courage to confront the bureaucracy, to confront developers, to confront the NYPD so that we remake this city as a great city to live in for every last one of us. And as a civil rights attorney who's worked for the ACLU and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, that also means Corona. That means Mott Haven. That means East New York and the North Shore of Staten Island, Northern Manhattan. And it means a vision that says we will create 100,000 new jobs and doing it, building housing we can all afford. It means we will have universal care centers for our children and our elderly. And it means that we will finally have a New York City mayor that is a mom as well.
Ms. Wiley, thank you very much. Eric Adams, you have the last word in these closing
statements. Thank you. Archbishop Desmond Tutu states, we spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river. No one goes upstream and prevent them from falling in the first place. We're not only allowing people to fall in the river of homelessness, crime, lack of education, healthcare crises, and all the other issues that betray New Yorkers and hold them back, we're actually pushing them in. It's time to take our city upstream where we can prevent the crisis. Dyslexia screening, so we won't have 30% of the inmates at Rikers Island. Assisting people with learning disabilities, so we won't have 55% that are there. Dealing with education, so we won't have 65% of our black and brown children not reaching proficiencies. This city betrayed my mother and my family. We can't allow another generation to be betrayed. You've done your job as taxpayers. I'm a blue-collar candidate that would be a blue-collar mayor and make sure this blue-collar city gets the city they deserve. This is our moment. Let's turn it into a movement.
Mr. Adams, thank you. And on that note, that's going to end this debate among the 8 Democratic candidates for mayor of New York. Candidates, each and every one of you, we thank you for your participation, but I think more importantly, thank you for running for office. Thank you for trying to serve the public, win or lose, and we wish you all luck. It is a noble venture and adventure that you're on, trying to make a difference and trying to improve the city we all love, and so we thank you. And more importantly, to our viewers, thank you, because you too are trying to find out information about these candidates who want to be mayor, and we hope we have been helpful in that effort. Either way, vote on June 22nd. It is your right and your responsibility. Early voting begins June 12th, just 10 days from now. To our sponsors, all of them, thanks for your input and your commitment to improving the city. And to my colleagues, Dave Evans of Eyewitness News and Yizel Taheda of Univision 41 News, thank you for insightful questions and your insights and your curiosity, most importantly, and for helping us make this a great debate. If you missed any of tonight's debate, or if you just want to see the whole thing again, we have it on our website, abc7ny.com. From all of us here, we wish you health and peace. And in this great city, let's take care of each other. Thanks for watching.